Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fada. This month, America celebrates their freedom with the 4th of July. So let's talk about how you can be financially free. Financial freedom means that your passive income covers not just your current lifestyle, but the lifestyle you always wanted. You have enough passive income to do all the things without having to worry about where the money is coming from. Once your finances allow you to go anywhere and do anything you want without you having to work for it or worry about it, you'll truly be financially free, meaning you can live your ideal life without having to work another day. Today, I'll be discussing how you can reach financial freedom with Kara Stevens. Kara is the founder of the Frugal Feminista. The Frugal Feminista helps women heal their relationship with money so they can play big with it. Kara and I will be discussing the difference between financial freedom and financial independence, the importance of emergency funds, creating the right budget, and much more. Now let's get to my interview with Kara. Hi, Kara. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Catherine, for having me. Super excited to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about reaching financial freedom. So to start, how would you define financial freedom?
I think financial freedom is a number where you're able to have work optional, where there's enough money coming in, where financially you don't have to worry about meeting your expenses, having both all of your needs and most of your wants accounted for.
Okay, so what about financial independence? Is that different from financial freedom?
I mean, there are a lot of different ideas about that, but I would say
Right.
the big difference between financial freedom and financial independence is the ability along the way to, at certain stages of financial independence, you're able to do certain things with your money that you might not have been able to do before. So financial independence, is a step along the way to financial freedom. So maybe you've eliminated a certain amount of debt or a certain percentage of debt that gives you a level of financial independence to pursue certain things. And then financial freedom is ultimately having enough wealth generated for you to be what I consider work optional and having more time freedom as well.
Yeah, because I think some people do get those two kind of like confused, but I liked your explanation of it. So independence is a stop on the way, and freedom is like what the ultimate goal would be, financial freedom, right?
Yeah, and I think people have different definitions of what that may be, and they have to calculate that for themselves. But in general, financial freedom tends to be a larger number.
How can we assess where we are financially before we start our journey to financial freedom?
Well, I think first, a big step of that is taking kind of an assessment of your net worth. Your net worth is a snapshot of where you are financially. And by snapshot, I actually mean a culmination of all the things you have done up until that point to show what your wealth is. And that is a simple calculation of your assets, the things that appreciate in value that you own, like your cash, your investments, your home, and any type of like real estate that you may own, jewelry, art, things like that, versus what you owe in terms of mortgage debt, any type of credit card debt, anything that requires you to have to pay something back. And I think once you have that snapshot, you're able to see, okay, what is my net worth? Is it positive, negative? Has it over the last couple of years, has it increased or decreased? And kind of find the holes in that particular issue. So if you have a lot of debt and you're noticing that it's continuing to creep up, kind of plugging those holes about what exactly is the cause of it. Is it something that I could do, whether it be signing up for loan forgiveness or reducing my credit card debt, and being able to get clear about that and having that as a first step. After you get your net worth established, then it's thinking about how much money do I really need? I think a lot of us kind of have this nebulous idea of like, I want to retire, I want to have financial freedom, but what does that actually look like in terms of numbers, and thinking about what does your ideal life look like when you think about what financial freedom and what you'll be doing with your time. So I think looking at a calculator in terms of what your retirement number would be, like how much money would you actually need, and then thinking about how many years I have to work, or if you are self-employed, how many more years I have to work, but even thinking about how much revenue do I have to generate, and then working backwards. What does that look like on a yearly basis, 5 years, 10 years, and then leaving some wiggle room in there for just life being life and things not necessarily going to plan.
So after we kind of like assess our net worth and stuff, what are the next steps we should take? And like how important is it to determine a why and determine what your goals are in reaching financial freedom?
After you've assessed your net worth, I think the next step is to actually do have an action plan. So it would be, do you have to increase your assets, decrease your liabilities, or do both? And I think with that, you're able to decide what are the various ways that you can do that, whether it be thinking more critically about how do I begin to maybe think about job hopping or salary negotiation, or also even bigger changes in your life when it comes to possibly moving to another place where there's cost of living shifts that work in your favor. And I think those are those big kind of high leverage pieces. And moving forward from there, you're then able to determine what type of investments should I start doing. Like thinking about, if I work for someone, funded my retirement to the company's match? If I work for myself, have I established some type of simple IRA or SEP IRA where I'm actually contributing consistently to this particular retirement number? And then from there, it's continuing to monitor and assess how aggressive am I going towards what my investments look like in my portfolio, or thinking about what are some other ways that I can begin to make my money work for me. And there are a number of things that you can do that, in addition to even having a side hustle or even using money from your business to start another business to bring in another source of income. Those are some ways that you can really kind of move after having figured out what your net worth is and move into financial freedom.
So then what would our next step be? Maybe creating an emergency fund? Is it important to have that on your path to financial freedom?
Oh, sure, sure. So when it comes to thinking at I guess the deeper, not a deeper level, but looking at the level of what does that look like on like a year-to-year basis, for sure. Having an emergency fund is an important part of any type of road towards financial freedom. And an emergency fund, for a lot of us, that means having 3, 6, 9, or 12 months of
Mhm.
living expenses saved up. And depending on what your number one risk tolerance is for life, and also thinking about what would be some of the things that are going on with your home that will contribute to how much you would have in your emergency fund. For example, if you are a single person, single as a Pringle, and you don't have any dependents, and you live in a city that isn't quite expensive and you don't have any debt, then something like 3, 4, or 5 months of an emergency fund would make sense for you. But if you have dependents, and you are possibly in an industry that may have a lot of fluctuations, like we've seen with the tech industry, maybe having 6, 9, and 12 months of emergency funds may be best for you to feel comfortable in the event something happens. And when thinking also about how do you move forward when you're thinking about emergency funds, it's also important to think about sinking funds, which a lot of us don't think about when we're thinking about what are next steps when it comes to where our money goes. And sinking funds are an important part of that conversation because emergency funds help you plan for the unexpected, and sinking funds allow you to plan for the expected, for the fun. And it keeps you out of debt because you're able to have a lot of your wants taken care of without putting yourself back in jeopardy of getting into debt.
Yeah, I was gonna say like having these funds is important because without them, it might derail your financial freedom because you might have to dip into that retirement savings you were talking about or something else to pay for an emergency. So once, let's say an emergency does happen, God forbid, how can we rebuild our emergency fund after we've used it? Because I think we talk a lot about having the fund, but what happens after we use it? How do we rebuild?
I think you have to think about how you start the emergency fund in the first place.
Mhm.
We don't want to you don't want, if it's not broken, then don't fix it. So thinking about some of the ways in which you were able to contribute first to an emergency fund. And for a lot of us, that is looking at what our monthly income is and either taking a percentage or a dollar amount and putting it automatically through like an automatic withdrawal to our, whether it be a high yield savings account. Some checking accounts offer some interest rates that may be favorable, and consistently doing that until you're able to replenish it. And I think that part of that conversation is looking back on what were some of the feelings as well that I had when I was on the road to saving for this emergency fund. Was it super aggressive and it made you feel very anxious or deprived of having funds? So the emergency fund may get to the same point as it was prior to that emergency, but it may take a little bit longer because you've been able to reassess. Have you found that saving has become easier and you can increase the dollar amount that you allot to the emergency fund without feeling deprived? Then you may get back to that number and exceed it a lot more quickly than the way you started it. And I think also looking for found money, easy ways to save that don't require extra work are great ways to build your emergency fund. So say, for example, if you have a tax return, that money can go straight into an emergency fund. Or you can use a part of it to enjoy, but most of it goes towards that. Any travel rewards points that can be redeemed for cash, that can go into there. Any type of rebates that you may come across and you actually send it back in and get your money back, that is great. If you are using out of network doctors, say for therapy, and you get reimbursed for part of the copay, then that can be put into your emergency fund. So being very open to various ways that that emergency fund can be replenished without having you to do extra work. So I would look for like very quick wins. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is having a financial freedom fund, which I just consider like a bucket full of loose change. And you'd be surprised that just having loose change and putting your loose change into this bucket, this financial freedom fund on a consistent basis can lead to hundreds of dollars that can be easily put into your emergency fund without you having to do extra work. And of course, like I alluded to earlier, with the high interest savings, the high yield savings account, if you're able to get one that's at like 4 or 5%, you're able to make money without you having to do anything else. So even being strategic about how long you stay with a particular online bank that offers the highest yield for your money is another way that you can rebuild your emergency fund without having to think too much about it and have to put any extra work into it.
Yeah, make your money work for you at the end of the day. And I love that you said talk about the tax return and everything like that, finding ways to put that aside. Like, I actually just did that with my tax return. I literally just put it to the side, right in the savings it goes. That's a great way to rebuild your savings or emergency funds. So we have our net worth, we have our action plan, retirement savings, emergency fund. What's the next step to reach financial freedom?
Retirement, we have our net worth, and I would say just non-retirement brokerage investing. So I think this is a key part of building our wealth and getting to financial freedom is after I've had my emergency fund and after I've been able to fund it, it's important for me to use excess money, what's left over, and make it work for me again. Because the benefit of having a non-retirement brokerage account is that the money grows in a similar ways that we would kind of do with retirement funds, but our company actually does a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and we don't have access to it until we're 59 and a half for a lot of us, is to think about how can I do the same I consider it the other side where you have access to this money as you need. So any type of structure that you've been used to continuously save, the same structure can be used to continuously invest. And I think once you've reached your emergency fund goal, or even if you've met half of it and you want to start getting investing as part of your plan, then you want to start thinking about how much of whatever extra money comes into my budget every month can I begin to invest? So let's just say you have $100 that's extra every month. Maybe 50 can go towards savings and 50 can go towards investing. So you feel like you're taking advantage of time in the market. So you don't have to do one thing after the other. You can do things simultaneously. So I would say that is another key part of reaching financial freedom. And similarly, when you're thinking about financial freedom, it's important for you to get out of debt. And there's a lot of people who have different ideas about, is this an important part of getting to financial freedom, and then what step should it be? But I think it depends on what your particular tolerance is for having debt, but also it's important to know what type of debt that you have. So let's say, for example, you have you have credit cards with high interest rates, 23, 28, 29, 32%. It makes the most sense to get a handle of getting out of that credit card debt because we don't see returns in the market that are at that level. But if you have credit card debt that's at 8% or 7% as an interest rate, it's just as smart to begin thinking about investing because you can see returns of 8 or 9% in the market. So it really depends on where you are in your journey of having this type of credit card debt and the amount that you have. So when thinking about financial freedom in relation to should I invest, should I get out of debt, the answer is it depends, and using that rule of thumb to kind of support you.
I think you've laid out a great path to get to financial freedom. So I kind of want to talk about enhancing our path. Well, let's talk about paying yourself first. How can this help us reach financial freedom and what is it?
I think when it comes to getting to financial freedom and paying yourself first, it's a very simple but difficult idea to navigate and understand because a lot of us feel guilty. They feel we have to pay our bills first and the things that we owe other people. But I think we owe it to ourselves to get to financial freedom. And so when it comes to paying yourself first, that means that before you pay a bill, you're first funding your emergency fund, you're first funding your retirement, you're first funding all the things that will cumulatively lead you to that financial freedom number. And what that means is often, I would say, is one of the best ways to pay yourself first is to automate your savings and to make sure that you don't touch that money at all. And in a lot of ways, by paying yourself first, you get into the habit of really seeing yourself as as the entity to be invested in the future and in the present, rather than just only looking at money as this thing to be paid to other people. And I think it puts you at the center of your finances, and it also just changes your relationship with money. I think it helps you see that money isn't only for paying bills, money is meant to multiply. Money is meant to help you have a level of abundance in the future that paying bills won't allow you to do. And also putting yourself first means that it gets done first. And a lot of us who feel extremely responsible and have a lot of pride attached to this idea of paying their debts and paying in full, I appreciate that. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. But if there's a chance that you may choose paying a bill or not at least pick up the phone to negotiate a better time to have it be paid, then putting money away for your savings, what ends up happening is that you're going to have to resort to those credit cards anyway. You're going to have to resort to putting things on loan anyway if you don't have the money already put aside to kind of circumvent what an issue could come up with down the line.
Yeah, and I like how you also mentioned about automating your savings. Like I wanted to touch about that too. I think automating is like the best thing for your finances. You know, it ensures you're getting paid, your bills are getting paid, and you don't even have to think about it.
Right.
So it's
Yeah, and
such a
I
great
think too,
tool.
it's important, like the automation, I think is a proactive approach to
Mhm.
ensuring that things go where they're supposed to go and takes you out of the equation. I think the second piece to that is to automate and monitor, because sometimes you may see that even if you're, say, automating your bill repayment, and you may say that, we're all human, we all make mistakes, companies included, that they may be more being taken out, or if ended a subscription, or you haven't kind of canceled a subscription, it's still being taken out. It may be important for you to monitor, especially the bills that are coming out, to make sure that you still kind of agree that these are the things that are important to you, that these things make sense for you in your budget at this time in your on the road to your financial goals.
Right. I was just going to say that. Speaking of budget, how can you create the right budget to help you reach financial freedom?
I think that's such a great question. I think that the right budget is a recursive process.
Okay.
If you are budget averse, that you think budgeting just kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies, I think what's important is for you to at least track how much you spend, right? So that'll give you a clear understanding of how much does it actually cost to live my life every week, every month, and then get clear about your numbers. Like, get clear about your numbers. And I think, secondly, in addition to the budgeting piece, is when does the money come out? Right? When I pay my bills, does it seem like I have no money by the 10th of the month? Well, maybe I need to spread my bill payment across the month so I feel like I'm not strapped for money at certain times of the month, because it gives me a false sense of not having enough when I actually do. And I think that when you think about budgeting, especially if you're a beginner, you just kind of want to get started with something that's maybe not too restrictive, especially if you're budget averse. So there are rules of thumb that people have different opinions about, but there are rules of thumb that you can adapt as you get more confident with what you're how you're managing your money. But there are rules like the 50-30-20 rule that I know many of us have heard, where 50% of your income goes towards your needs like transportation, housing, food, and childcare, transportation, medicine. 30% goes toward the fund, your wants, and 20% goes towards savings and debt elimination. And if you're in the spirit of being a little bit more aggressive because you do have, say, more debt or more aggressive savings goals, you can adjust those numbers accordingly. So the easiest way is to flip those second two numbers, those last two numbers. So it'll be 50% goes towards the needs, 30% goes towards savings and debt elimination, and 20% go towards wants. And you can even flip it to, like, 50, 35, 25. It can really go any way. But having something simple like that as a place to start, I think, can give you a really good sense of, am I actually within this benchmark, or things that can be moved? Can I adjust certain things? I think there's one way that you can find what budget is right for you. And I think it's also important to know, like, are you more of a tech person? Would an app help you budget better, and you can see your spending and recommendations being made for you on a screen, and then having you then make decisions around that? That's another way. And I think another big piece about finding the right budget for you is also looking at what's happening in your life at this time. I know a lot of us, we're in the personal finance world. I think the trend is we shouldn't spend money, we should be better savers. And I think that's, of course, important. But there's some of us who actually hoard money. And some of these rules can even make us even more financially hoarding, withholding than needed. So it's important for us to see exactly what's my relationship to money. And I think your relationship to money can be helpful in dictating what budget may be a right start for you, right? You may need because someone who may be a financial hoarder, having a strict budget may make them even more wary and fearful of spending. And so it really depends on, like I said, your relationship with money and where you're starting. And I think even your financial goals, like, there are going to be times in your life where you will be spending more money. You move to a new city, you had a job loss, you have a new baby, like, there's going to be money spent more in certain seasons of your life. And then adjusting your budget accordingly, that a 50-30-20 rule may not make sense, or maybe a 70-20-10, where the same 70% goes towards needs, 20% goes towards wants, and 10% goes towards fun, may make more sense because of these actual things that are happening in your life. So I think you don't stick to one budget forever. You kind of start someplace that makes sense and then adjust along the way, based, like I said, on your relationship with money and what season you are in your life.
That was a great explanation. I think it's definitely important to adjust because budgets aren't one size fits all. Everyone's going to have a different budget and at different stages of life too. That's such a great point. Because, I was just, every month can be different too, where it's like you might have three weddings one month, you might have nothing another month. Yeah. So it all evens out. Every month I like to say you have to assess. But I also love how you kind of talked about people's relationships with money. Some people might kind of look at money negatively. So how can we look at money positively? And how does having a positive outlook on money help you reach financial freedom?
I think that, I think a lot of us may have negative relationships with money because we have unexamined beliefs around money. And a lot of those belief systems come from our childhood experiences with money. And our childhood experiences are rooted in a lot of different things for so many of us. So money and religion play a role in how we view money. Money and gender play a role. Money and even birth order. If you were the oldest, maybe you were expected to, take care of your siblings or kind of be a surrogate parent for them. Money and culture, that maybe as a first generation immigrant from another country, you're bridging two worlds of what it means to have like American optimism and kind of a freer approach to money than maybe say a culture where frugality was a value and was respected. And so I think first being able to tap into your past and understand what were some of those messages that you learned can help you begin to start painting the pictures and connecting the dots to why you have the current relationship with money. And I think the second step in that is to assess the benefit of your current relationship with money vis-a-vis your past experiences. I always say that there is no financial identity that is 100% dysfunctional. So growing up in my household, I'm a first generation American from the Caribbean and single mom, she was raising two kids in the 70s and 80s. And there was a lot of, I would say, scarcity mindset around money. Like you have to save, no one's going to be there to support you. You have to be resourceful. And out of that, I had to let go of some of this idea that there was never enough, but that same perspective on life allowed me to be extremely thoughtful with money. I know I will never go broke because of the systems and structures that I learned early on. Now I have to learn how to have a little bit more fun money, have a little bit more levity with money. On the other hand, someone who may consider themselves having a very dysfunctional relationship with money, maybe they overspend or maybe they're too generous, what they can get out of that is that they love life, they love people, they love to have a good time with money. Now is just time to rein it in a bit so they can enjoy the money, but also grow the money. You see what I'm saying? So it's first it's basically giving yourself credit for
Right.
where you are and realize that each relationship is nuanced and there's pieces of it that you can keep, but it's if and in the pieces that you no longer want to keep, it's how can you reframe that belief into something that's a little bit more affirming, more functional, and more aligned with your future goals. So if you say, for example, you say you have a bad relationship with money, a way to reframe that is I may have bad relationship or may think I have a bad relationship with money now. However, I can learn the skills I need in order to eliminate debt, or I can connect with people or be a part of a community that teaches me how. Like my relationship with debt is not permanent. So saying things like that and reframing it gives you a little bit more of hope that things can get better and that it is a possibility instead of feeling that your relationship with money, is number one, all you're doing because it was an inherited set of beliefs that you might have picked up. And then secondly, that it's permanent because it's not.
How can our listeners, our young listeners, start? How is it important for them to start working towards financial freedom now? How can it help them at a young age to reach financial freedom later?
The best thing is that you're young and fabulous. Like you have so much time on your side.
Right.
You have to do what we would arguably say less than you would have to do than when you get older. You have a larger time frame in order to build wealth. And if you start early, you can start with less money. And I think that it's important for you to understand that you don't need a lot of money to begin to build your wealth journey. And for rules of thumb, every $10 that comes through your hand, try and save two, right? So start with simple things that you can do. So you get $10, you may at this point want to spend eight, but you save two. And that will mean that you're saving 20% of all money that comes through your fingers. So starting there will allow you to do that. And of that 20%, 50% of it can go towards investing. So once you begin to start that process, just get in the habit of looking at your money as how can I invest some of this? How can I save some of this? And how can I spend some of this? Gives you a more holistic and a healthier relationship with money at an earlier age for a longer period of time. So you'll be more than likely to reach your goals because you'll be able to have more time in the market to deal with the ups and downs of how it works, but also you'll be saving in a savings account that will continue to grow your money and hopefully outpace inflation if you have it in the types of accounts that bear more than inflation.
Right. And I feel like a lot of young people too, when they're first starting out in the workplace, their first paycheck, they are not thinking about saving and investing. They have student loans, they have credit card debt, they're still living at home, they're trying to move out. But it's so
Yeah.
important for them to also, as you said, even if it's $2, just put something towards saving and investing. Start getting in the habit young so then you can really take advantage of it when you're older.
For sure. I think like Gen Z, or I think whatever the next generation
Yeah.
is after Gen Z, they've seen so many problems with how society is working. I feel like they're more aware that something has to be done earlier, even if they don't know exactly what the right, I'm putting quote unquote, right things are to do. They know they have to do something. So I think they're more open to seeing the examples and the non-examples of how to do money early on.
And I think that Gen Z has learned from millennials, my generation, a lot. So they're like, oh, we don't want to be like them. So we're going to make some differences.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree.
Kara, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Before you head out, do you want to kind of tell everyone about the Frugal Feminista and what you do?
Yeah, so the Frugal Feminista is a platform and a community that really helps women heal their relationship with money and really get a deep understanding of why they do what they do with their money so they can, similar to what we are talking about, get on the way to financial freedom, but with a sense of ease and a sense of confidence. And we do this through so many different ways, through coaching, through retreats, and a number of other places, spaces that allow us to really tap into our emotions around money so we can rewrite our money stories.
Oh, that's great. And I'll link all that Frugal Feminista in the bio so all the listeners can get that there. But thank you for joining me on the podcast today, Kara. I had a great time talking to you.
Thank you, Captain. This was amazing.
Yes, thank you. Financial freedom isn't always about being rich and having tons of money, but having enough to cover your expenses so that you can spend your time doing what you like rather than doing things just to earn money. Start with a net worth snapshot and a calculation of your assets. Then create a plan of action, establish your retirement fund, create an emergency fund, and have sinking funds. Now that you have your path made, pay yourself first before you pay your bills. This will help fund your savings and invest in your future self. Don't forget to automate that payment. Once your payments are automated, be proactive and monitor your payments so you don't overpay the amounts that don't fit in your budget anymore. Create a budget that's right for you because budgets aren't universal. Lastly, start your financial freedom when you're young because time is on your side. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.